From the Cronkite studios in downtown Phoenix, this is Cronkite News.
Gotta see people as opponents but not enemies.
A string of suspicious packages sent to political figures and the Time Warner building in New York City. How the Trump administration plans to address these threats.
Less than 2 weeks before voters head to the polls for the 2018 midterms, we go to D.C., where activists are focused on increasing the Latino voter turnout.
Plus, new data shows a nearly 40% increase in immigrants crossing into the United States, despite efforts from Border Patrol.
Cronkite News starts now.
Good evening and welcome to Cronkite News on Arizona PBS. I'm Jennifer Alvarez.
And I'm Bryce Newberry. Thank you for joining us.
CNN, the Clintons, the Obamas, and several more Democratic leaders are among the targets of suspicious devices mailed around the country, leading to evacuations, bomb squad calls, and concerns about domestic terrorism. President Donald Trump said a federal investigation is now underway.
In these times, we have to unify. We have to come together and send one very clear, strong, unmistakable message that acts or threats of political violence of any kind have no place in the United States of America.
Jeff Flake was near the Time Warner Center when the building was evacuated. So far, there have been no suspicious packages reported in Arizona. Reporter Gabriela Becerra spoke with a venue security specialist who explains what you should watch out for.
But just a question, is this right?
Stephen Adelman specializes in venue security and says every office should have an emergency plan with a bomb threat checklist, which includes checking mail before opening it.
There are more obvious things like the package is wet or leaking, or there is a wire hanging out of it, or it's taped in a really obsessive manner. These are all typical telltale signs of a package that is a suspicious package.
The package sent to CNN was in a manila envelope and covered in tape, with addresses printed and taped to the front. Adelman says the events of this morning will not change the precautions high-profile people take.
The world hasn't changed for ordinary people just doing their thing, nor have the events of this morning changed the safety concerns and precautions for the Clintons or the Obamas or for CNN.
He says political leaders and newsrooms are always high-profile targets.
They all have procedures in place, and they were all in place yesterday, and they will continue to be in place today and tomorrow.
Senator Jeff Flake was near the Time Warner building when it was evacuated after a mailroom employee alerted security of the suspicious package.
This is horrible. That anytime anybody's threatened like this is not good. So there's been a lot of this going around lately.
Flake says both sides, Democratic and Republican, need to be more civil.
So we've got to tone down the rhetoric, both sides. Got to see people as opponents but not enemies.
In Phoenix, Gabriela Becerra, Cronkite News.
Adelman says that if someone receives a suspicious package, they should not open it and report it to the police immediately.
Election Day is now just 13 days away, and Cronkite News is checking the early voter turnout daily. According to the Secretary of State's office, about 657,000 Arizona voters have cast their ballots already. About 44% of those early ballots were registered Republicans. About 33% were registered Democrats, and 22% of the ballots were designated independent or other. The National Association of Latino Elected and Appointed Officials came out with its forecast today for voter turnout. It's predicting that as many as 7.8 million Latino voters could go to the polls across the U.S. And Naleo said it expects turnout to be strong in Arizona as well. Charlene Santiago in our Washington bureau has more on the report.
Naleo says as many as 486 Latinos will likely turn out in Arizona, a number they say could be much higher if Latinos in the state didn't continue to face obstacles in registering and voting.
We can't just sit by and watch while elections happen without doing all we can to ensure Latinos participate and make their voices fully heard.
More Latinos are expected to vote this year in Arizona than in the last midterms in 2014, as many as 13% more. But Naileo estimates that 80,000 eligible Latino voters in the state could be affected by voter ID laws.
This map presents the number of Latinos in each of these states that could be affected by these voter ID laws.
For those who are registered and ready to vote, however, there's another problem. They're being ignored by candidates.
So we're not seeing investment in the Latino electorate overall.
When it comes to campaign voter engagement, more than half of Latinos nationwide told Naileo that they have not been contacted by a candidate for this election.
The numbers don't lie. If 53% of Latino registered voters consistently, week after week after week after week after week, tell us that no one's talking to them, then something isn't happening.
But not every campaign agrees. National Democrats insist they are working closely with local campaigns to increase Latino engagement.
Our focus has been to invest in the grassroots efforts that are being done by the state parties, and we've done so in this election cycle, and I think we'll continue to do so moving forward.
And Vargas says there are plenty of issues that Latino voters are energized about if politicians will listen.
In terms of what more outreach means, it means hard work. It means knocking on doors. It means calling people. It means engaging them. It means listening to Latino voters and not assume that you know exactly what's on their minds.
Naileo says while immigration continues to be a top priority for this electorate, it's not the only one. Some of the other issues Latinos are looking to address include improving wages, creating more jobs, and lowering health care. In Washington, Charlene Santiago, Cronkite News.
The number of arrests of undocumented immigrants, including children, has reached the highest point of the Trump presidency despite its zero-tolerance policy. Reporter Alexa Avila is tracking the latest.
Despite repeated efforts by the federal government to stop it, the number of immigrants attempting to cross through the southern Arizona border continues to grow day by day. Arizona is one of the epicenters of the immigration issue, so I went to Douglas, asking those who live at the border what they think.
You don't feel like you're safe.
Josefina Sanchez came to the United States seeking asylum 25 years ago and has lived in the southern Arizona border city of Douglas for 23. Recently, she says she feels like a criminal in her own town.
Because they see like somebody look a little bit different or dark skin or something, you know, they just follow and stop to question.
Why are we not going to the core of that issue?
Douglas Mayor Robert Uribe says the Trump administration doesn't understand that building a wall or separating families is proving to not deter people from wanting to flee desperate circumstances in their home countries.
The majority of the folks crossing the U.S. currently are folks from Central America. So I raised the question, why isn't our country collaborating in an effective way to come together and figure out a comprehensive immigration policy?
Recent data released by U.S. Customs and Border Patrol shows the number of undocumented immigrants crossing into the United States has increased 38% just in the last month, despite the many efforts to stop it. Dan Stein, president of the Federation of Immigration Reform, a Washington, D.C.-based group that seeks to reduce both legal and undocumented immigration in the U.S., says the United States government has every right to detain and prosecute undocumented immigrants.
Right. If the zero-tolerance policy had been able to play out as intended, 6 months from now, you'd be almost no one trying to cross the border.
However, Eric Salazar, Director of Financial Empowerment for Unidos U.S., says recent change in immigration policies do more harm than good.
We actually need the people that are coming here, right? We need the workforce. So it's a little short-sighted for them to see it as just you know, all the bad people coming in or whatever the case may be.
Cronkite News repeatedly has reached out to U.S. Customs and Border Patrol for comment, but so far they have denied our requests for an interview. Data released yesterday by the Trump administration shows the number of people apprehended at the Arizona southern border jumped more than 50% just within the past year. In the broadcast center, Alexa Avila, Cronkite News.
Meanwhile, authorities from both sides of the border are working toward a permanent solution for the burst pipeline that spilled thousands of gallons of raw sewage in Naco. Cronkite News reporter Brittany Watson also made her way down to the southern border to see what exactly is going on.
The burst pipeline is now under control, but not completely fixed. The leak has forced authorities from the U.S. and Mexico to come together and try to repair it, despite the many challenges. This line shows just how high the spilled sewage had piled into this storm drain. Sewage that flowed in for weeks from Naco, Sonora, and although now stopped, is still causing concern for nearby residents.
I would hate to see the young people affected by this. If they become infected with type A or B hepatitis, it could plague them the rest of their lives.
Tests done by the Arizona Department of Environmental Quality show the east and west sewage flow tested positive for E. coli and lead. However, additional testing done by health officials highlighted that the drinking water is safe to consume.
We don't have any reason to believe that there is any industrial discharge going into this system or any hazardous waste being disposed in this system.
Weeks ago, there was a steady flow of sewage making its way across the border fence onto the U.S. side. As you can see now, it is completely dry. There still is a ton of garbage, but with repair efforts being made on the Mexico side, the flow has stopped. Many of the residents in Naco, Sonora didn't even know there was a toxic sewage problem happening just a few yards away from their homes.
There was no smell. It was just the spillage, but no smell, even when it was hot in the evenings. Honestly, it didn't affect us at all.
The people in Mexico don't realize we have an international problem that can cause a binational problem to escalate, including closing down the border. It can happen if we don't fix it.
Recent pipeline repairs have included cleaning the lagoons and the removal of debris, but it all comes at a cost, with the North American Development Bank, based in San Antonio, having to fund the project.
All the infrastructure costs money. And so it's just a matter of us getting to that point of helping them with grants and loans so they can fully repair their system.
The problem is controlled but not fixed. If we don't continue with maintenance and clean the pipes, it could become a greater issue. I think we shouldn't drop our guard and continue solving the problem.
There's still a lot of work to be done. Repairs and replacements can take up until March of 2019. From the Broadcast Center, Brittany Watson, Cronkite News.
Some changes could be in store for leadership at the Grand Canyon.
Coming up on Cronkite News, the Grand Canyon superintendent is temporarily removed following a series of allegations. We have an update from the National Park Service.
Plus, activists protest a local online retailer company against certain items they feel exploit their culture.
I'm Judy Woodruff, anchor and managing editor of the PBS NewsHour. The journalists of tomorrow face a fast-changing media landscape, but quality news remains vitally important to our communities, our country, and our world. At ASU's Walter Cronkite School of Journalism and Mass Communication, students learn solid, reliable reporting, holding the powerful accountable, and rebuilding the public's trust. The Cronkite School and Arizona PBS, preparing the next generation for a stronger future of journalism.
The superintendent of Grand Canyon National Park is under investigation by the Office of the Inspector General for undisclosed allegations. Grand Canyon employees found out Friday that Superintendent Christine Leonards was under investigation. 4 investigators arrived at the national park on Monday. They'll do interviews and gather information on the allegations. Once the inquiry is finished, the Inspector General will release a report. The National Park Service will have 90 days to respond. The agency issued a statement to Cronkite News today saying in part, in order to protect the integrity of the OIG's investigation into these allegations, the Grand Canyon superintendent will move temporarily into a position outside of the park while the investigation is conducted. For now, Grand Canyon deputy superintendents will serve as the acting superintendent. According to the Office of the Inspector General, fraud, waste, abuse, ethics, and mismanagement of financial resources are some of the allegations the office investigates.
Culture, not costumes. Protesters walked onto the property of an online retailer selling Halloween outfits that resemble Native American dress. Sammy Gieber spoke to those speaking out to protest these designs.
People, not costumes! People, not costumes!
Signs and petition in hand.
I have here a change.org
petition with almost 23,000 signatures asking Yandy to retire their Native American costume line.
Would you please leave our premises?
A group is advocating for this Phoenix-based online retailer to stop the sale of costumes they say exploits their culture.
These small things are not small.
Everything has meaning, even like colors and types of materials used.
Cher Thomas is in the business of making traditional Native clothing. And everything, from patterns to symbols, has meaning.
So when you go to make this clothing, you have to be very cognizant of those things.
So when Thomas sees companies like Yandy put out costumes resembling Native clothing, she describes it as disrespectful and believes it can perpetuate violence against Indigenous women.
You know, Native clothing is about sanctifying the individual. When companies like this use our traditional dressmaking and manipulates it, it feels dehumanizing.
So this is us speaking out as Native people.
Yandy has been in the spotlight before. In September, the company pulled a sexy costume resembling that of concubines in the Hulu series The Handmaid's Tale after social media outcry.
Handmaid's Tale is able to get more support from this company than actual people.
Yandy says on their website these sexy Native American costumes pay homage to the beauty of the tradition.
That it's not okay for you to costume us.
But protesters think otherwise. In Phoenix, Sammy Giebers, Cronkite News.
Yandy did not respond to requests for comment on the petition or the protest, but they did tell activists they appreciated their sentiments and understand that they have a right to express their opinions.
The monsoon in Arizona is unpredictable, but researchers may soon be able to better understand the stormy behaviors.
Coming up on Cronkite News, we talk to researchers who are digging for answers on the ocean floor.
Temperatures across the entire state are heating up once again, and we're only going to get hotter this weekend. I'll tell you which of the 2 days will be the warmest coming up.
By the year 2050, there will be more plastic in the ocean than fish. Before Professor Halden, I had an insane amount of passion, but I almost felt helpless because I didn't know how to use it. Professor Halden gave me a chance to make a difference. Being at a place like ASU allows you to take these big leaps. Ultimately, the biggest problems in the world cannot be solved alone.
It's impossible to predict when and where thunderstorms during Arizona's monsoon will strike. Researchers at the University of Arizona are finding new ways to predict the monsoon's behavior. Cronkite News reporter Jordan Evans found out how digging at the bottom of the ocean could provide some answers.
The North American monsoon is a change in the weather pattern during the summertime for the southwest United States. The skies can change from radiant to rainy in an instant. This pattern change can bring all sorts of weather, from storms to dust, but the monsoon's intensity may be something we can better understand in the future. In fact, it is in this laboratory at the University of Arizona where researchers have spent years analyzing compounds of mud from the Gulf of California in hopes of finding a connection with the monsoon.
So this is a sediment core, and you can see here that the mud from the seafloor is captured.
Jessica Tierney is a geologist at the University of Arizona. She uses this espresso-like machine to take this mud and turn it into a liquid full of secrets.
What we're looking at are the waxes that are on the leaves of plants. They're preserved for thousands of years in the mud from the Gulf of California. By measuring this chemistry of the plant waxes, we can actually go back in the past and tell you how much summer versus winter rain there was. This is the first study to actually quantify how the monsoon has changed since the last ice age. And that's why it's kind of an unopened book for us.
The research shows the monsoon was much weaker during the last ice age than it is today. She says having the ability to look at the monsoon's behavior with numbers is a new breakthrough. And that's why the research has sparked the interest of other scientists.
If they can go down to deeper layers where it was a warmer period, it was interglacial, something where we had similar kind of CO2 that we have now, and they can see how was the monsoon consistent then? Did it continue? Was it more intense? Was it less intense? That will be very useful information.
Useful information that could open up ideas for other areas of research, like forecasting drought.
I hope that this will be relevant for policymakers. So especially our work that's done here, I think it could be directly relevant for water resource management. If we have a better idea on how the monsoon will behave, can certainly help people in the Southwest plan for future drought.
The research has only made conclusions about the North American monsoon's behavior from about 20,000 years ago, but the hope is to integrate the data with global climate models.
What we're interested in knowing about is how the monsoon is going to change in the future and how we can prepare.
In Tucson, Jordan Evans, Cronkite News.
The team is currently pursuing mud samples from even deeper layers of the seafloor. That could help them understand how the monsoon acted millions of years ago. And we've had some unusual weather conditions so far in October, with more rain and more severe weather than usual.
Yeah, last night we even saw dust devils and hail in some parts of the valley. Haley, what can we expect for the rest of the week?
Yeah, that's right. Yesterday was a wild weather day for us across the entire state. Glendale getting most of that action over in the West Valley, topping off, I think they got about 3/4 of an inch of rain. We didn't see nearly as much accumulation here in the valley, but we did see those stormy conditions. But that's all different today. Taking a look at the radar, we can see it's completely quiet across the entire state, and that's because of this movement of dry air pushing all of that moisture out of the region into the northeast, warming things up just a little bit as we dry out. And our high pressure system actually visited us today, which is again going to rise those temperatures up going into the rest of the week. Today we're topping out right now around 83 degrees. We're going to bump back down into those upper 70s by 7 o'clock tonight, and then jumping down to 72 by about midnight. Again, tomorrow those temperatures are going to rise even more, getting hotter. 87 here in Phoenix, hot spot in the state down in Yuma at 92. We're going to cool off just a touch going into our evening tomorrow night, 63 here in Phoenix. Look at that high country, 34 up in Flagstaff, 33 in the Grand Canyon. But again, we're only going to continue to see those warm temperatures continue through the rest of the week. Our hot spot for the week, check this out. We're back at 92 degrees on Sunday, but that high pressure system will eventually move out of the region, and we're going to cool back down back into the 70s by this time next week. In the Cronkite Weather Center, I'm Haley Brand.
With Halloween just 1 week away, most people look to get to haunted houses to get a good scare.
Coming up on Cronkite News, some monsters are leaving the scare grounds to visit schools in order to scare kids into better behavior.
If you're looking for one show that tells you what happened that day in the world of business, it's NBR.
We saw a classic shipwreck.
Nordstrom's opening stores.
Triple-digit gains.
Crude climbs.
We're there to help our audience find new investment ideas.
The market still has room to go up.
Nightly Business Report is the longest-running business television program in history.
Weeknights at 10:30 on Arizona PBS.
I'm Matt Berry, ESPN Sports Center anchor and graduate of ASU's Walter Cronkite School of Journalism and Mass Communication. With its bachelor's and master's degrees in sports journalism, the Cronkite School is preparing the next generation of sports journalists to tell stories that matter, stories that excite, inspire, and inform. Cronkite immerses students in covering sports at all levels in one of the country's top sports markets. It's this hands-on experience under the guidance of award-winning sports media veterans that shape the top journalists of tomorrow.
October is National Bullying Awareness Month, and one Valley school has a spooky twist on it. Cronkite News reporter John Cardinelli has the details in Glendale.
Students at Barcelona Elementary School in Glendale cheered and clapped when a monster walked into their auditorium.
You know, Don't Be a Monster is a charitable program that was founded by haunters. So where we were working with other charities, we found that those charities didn't always understand where we were coming from as a haunted house organization, and maybe weren't exactly what we were looking to impact.
So what did the haunters want to impact? Bullying. and they wanted to do it using a scary character.
This is Frank Shelley. He appears to be a monster, but in fact, he's not a monster at all. It is through his story that Don't Be a Monster is able to teach children about bullying.
I saw the video for the first time and it set me back like, wow, we're showing this in a school environment.
The video depicts Frank as a school student who constantly gets bullied because of his monstrous looks. It covers a wide range of topics, including cyberbullying and how to stand up for others and yourself. Students say the video makes an impact.
Be yourself and don't let others judge you. Like if someone bullies you, maybe just try to ignore it or ask an adult to help you.
And while many lessons on bullying can be taken away from Frank's video, Frank is what resonates with most.
Really become this character that goes beyond just the screen in the video. I have people asking for him at the show, hey, is Frank out here tonight? Is he gonna be in the show? And you wanna keep the magic alive, like Frank's real, but I turn to things like, no, he's not one of the monsters scaring. Frank doesn't like to scare people.
Frank doesn't scare people because he comforts those who can relate with him instead. In Glendale, John Cardinelli, Cronkite News.
Don't Be a Monster has been serving in Phoenix for roughly 6 years, and they plan on bringing informative presentations on bullying to schools for years to come.
Cronkite News is proud to be the news division of Arizona PBS. Here's what's coming up on Arizona Horizon and PBS NewsHour.
On the next Arizona Horizon, we will talk to a local church leader who is helping take in Mexican and Central American migrants, and a debate on Proposition 305, which would expand public money for private schools.
I'm Judy Woodruff. On the next NewsHour, with less than 2 weeks until the midterm elections, we examine key governor's races on the ballot. That's Wednesday on the PBS NewsHour.
That's it for Cronkite News tonight. Thanks for joining us.
For top Arizona stories anytime, go to cronkitenews.azpbs.org.